Hey, Professor Ark here again with yet another video about life in the ancient world. This time all about the Greeks with their sex and sexuality, especially Greek homosexuality, pederasty, or one might perhaps call it better, bisexuality. Now, as a word of warning first, some of this may be a bit much for some of you. Certainly when I first saw some of these artifacts on display at an exhibit at the British Museum, it was so over the top I couldn't help laughing. But nonetheless, this was in common use. There were thousands, if not tens of thousands of these items that have been found. Just that because of modern day concerns, they are usually never put on display. But that's not what the Greeks and Romans were about. There's also one question about Greek homosexuality. Back in the day, when the 19th century, 18th century, when historians first started looking into, in a serious way, about ancient Greece, they kept on coming across these idea that the Greeks were engaging in homosexuality on a widespread basis. They couldn't believe it, largely because they are reading their own prejudices and biases into that of the past, which is not uncommon. We humans tend to do that, since in their society, homosexuality was not considered just not only a sin, but a crime. They just couldn't imagine their wonderful, glorious Greeks as doing something similar. Even today, there are still objections, usually on religious grounds. Some of it sort of also, well, maybe it was just a small elite, it wasn't widespread. It does, in fact, increasingly look as if it was fairly widespread throughout Greek society. In fact, it's kind of a bell curve. There were a small group who were totally straight all the time, another small group were totally gay, though the word, of course, gay was not used. There's no really such thing as, well, in a gay culture as an alternative culture. Homosexual all the time. And the rest are on some level of bisexuality. And that's for both men and women, which raises interesting questions about sexuality in humans and the modern times, but that's for another subject and really for someone else to deal with. Okay, so the Greeks were very open, really very open about sexuality. Who you could have sex with was highly restricted. It's kind of the reverse of modern American society. Modern America, there's really no penalty, at least not much, for if you're whoever you're having sex with, but oh my God, you try to show it on television or the regular movies or except for maybe HBO or Showtime, or in print, people just freak out. The Greeks, again, as I said, it's kind of the reverse. Sex itself was not considered in any way sinful because the Greeks did not recognize the concept of sin. Their religion just didn't have that. Again, for more of that, look at my lecture on Greek paganism. But sex was considered the gift of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and sex. A reward for life's difficulties. And again, this is the kind of things I'm talking about. You would see thousands of items like this. This was actually usually, they actually had stuff like this that was carried in the parades in Athens and other Greek cities. And sometimes smaller ones the guys would carry around, and there's a good train of thought that comedy comes from Greek comedy. These kind of lewd jokes made at the expense of these various phallic symbols. We do know that according to Herodotus, at the festival of the great Dionysia, in honor of Dionysus, they had at least one float, kind of like a Rose Bowl parade float, which really be kind of freaky to see it. But by ropes and pulleys, they had, well, a giant phallus that would go erect and then would come back down. And people would shout, cheer, yay! I don't know. I'm not sure what she's doing here. Apparently she is feeding the phalluses. And I guess this is kind of 2 pole dancers, making it quite obvious. Now again, one way the Greeks were very open about sex was the real ubiquity, here I'll disappear for a second, of phallic symbols. And just plain phalli everywhere. There was an occasional vulva, but they were really into the phallic ideal. And they had them in everything. I mean, little things like this would be kind of worn on a charm bracelet or on a necklace around your neck. I mean, people today might put, cross star or cross around their neck as part of their necklace. Here they'd have a phallus. There are also, again, brooches, rings. You can see some of the rings here. These are some of the little charms that gleam the fist. And again, the little phallus here, the rings and stuff that they would have. They also had them, on the next slide you'll see, bird feeders. There was a herm in front of every residence or temple, which included a phallic symbol. There were statues everywhere, big ones, small ones. There were advertisements. There were wind chimes like this, which is okay. Here's a woman riding one. This is a herm. And again, you can see the thing. And it was a duty of the women of the family, because there was one of these in front of every residence and every temple and public building. And it was the duty of the women of the family or the local families. Every day you had to anoint the head, this head, the one on top, with oil and garland with flowers. And then as people would walk by, they would usually rub this head for good luck. Unlike the way today, I guess some people, you see a statue, rub their, like a bronze, they rub their foot or their nose or something. This is a statue of Pan, the small one that you might have in your house. They're also like this ones. This is like, instead of a row of sphinxes, a row of erect phalli at the temple of Dionysus in Delos. Erect. They were destroyed by Christians later. Were very upset about this type of stuff. You'd have stuff like this on a side of a wall. This one was also oddly enough pointing towards the street name. But as you went by, you could rub it. Good luck. This is a phallic urn. Not sure what this is supposed to be about, but this is quite the normal practice. Now, prostitution was common everywhere except in Sparta. And usually at least 20% of Polis's population was engaged in it. It brought in so much money that every city owned at least one brothel for added state revenue. In places like Illinois, makes you wonder. Well, anyway, another story. Prostitutes range from common pornoi. Pornoi is the Greek word. Oh, that's the plural. Like pornography, that's what it comes from. In brothels, most of these would have been slaves. There might still be a few free women. To free educated hetera or heterai, that's the plural, who would work on their own for the equivalent of up to $10,000 a night. These, by the way, were educated prostitutes, courtesans, because apparently some Greek men would want to converse intelligently with a woman while he is or is not having sex with her, because his own wife was kept illiterate and didn't know anything. Of course, the solution would have been, I would think, to simply educate their wives and daughters, but apparently not. It was that idea. Apparently for that, you'd have to go to a hetera for that, which, and we claim the Greeks invented rationality and reason. By the way, these are the only Greek women allowed to handle money. They were small business women, usually in business for themselves, by themselves. They did their own accounts. They handled money, which, of course, the whole idea of why women in these Greek city-states could not be in business for themselves or handle money was that men thought of them as too stupid. They have the brains of children, too stupid, no matter how old they were, to do so and handle money, and yet here the courtesans are doing the exact same anyway. Now, another big deal, as I mentioned earlier, was bisexuality or pederasty. Now, in most states in America, this is quite illegal. As personally, I think it should be. But for the Greeks, remember, as soon as you hit puberty, that made you an adult. Certainly, the girls are getting married off as soon as they hit puberty, age 12 to 14. And the boys, likewise, we did some of this with education, the lecture on Class Act, talking about the Spartans. But bisexual and pederasty was the norm among the Greeks. They thought that only in a homosexual, pederastic relationship could a man find true love. And you look at it over and over again. It's not about equals, approximately equal in age. It's always older and younger. A somewhat older man, 20s, with a younger boy. And usually the man would go and court the boy, and as a sign of affection would give him a dead chicken for some reason. There are many pictures of this, and in the accounts, that's how you would apparently woo the boy to go and give him a dead chicken. Now, such relationships, as I said, had to be between an older male. Their older male was called the Erastes, and the teenage boy was called the Aromenos. So the idea was that the older male would mentor the boy and teach him about the ways of the world, and how to vote, and do all that other stuff. Apparently, the father was not to be involved. And in return, he would enjoy the boy's beauty, youth, and promise, and sex. Not always penetration, but often. Then remember, they thought there was nothing wrong with it. Relationships between those approximately equal in age were strictly prohibited. Violators were exiled, and you would lose both your citizenship and your property. And if you dared to have sex with somebody who had not hit puberty, under 12, boy or girl, that is a capital offense. You would be executed by crucifixion, which is a long, slow, horrible death. Which is not to say that they were not engaged in somewhat equal and thing, but you didn't want to get caught, ever. Now, there were, besides female prostitutes, said that 20% engaged, there were also male prostitutes for men all over the city. These are, again, teenage boys, because that's what the Greeks were into, and almost certainly slaves. Any free male older than 17 who worked as a prostitute, a male prostitute for men, or a male prostitute for women, by the way, but the women are never allowed out of the house anyway, lost all citizenship rights and property. As with men and boys, so with women and girls, lesbians were totally okay. Usually the men did not want women to leave the house and get involved in adultery with a man, but technically I guess this is adultery, it's just with a woman, and the men, Greek men, didn't care because two lesbians cannot physiologically get pregnant. It's all about the child. But the relationship of women and girls had to be the same thing. Older woman, younger girl. She would introduce the girl as to the ways of being a housewife, apparently. Maybe of being a courtesan, but that seems to have been incredibly rare. Ooh, what the heck is going on there? So, as Plato once said, and, finding quotes that were not terribly horrible, Plato once said, "For I know not any greater blessing to a young man who is beginning life than a virtuous lover," older male, "or to the lover than a beloved youth." So, If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you know when the next History Waits for No One video comes out and is posted. You can also catch History Waits for No One on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. As for the informations, that's together. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I will discuss this and others with you in the comments below.